The Royal Indian Air Force or the Indian Air Force? That is the question. At first glance, the distinction appears quite trivial, but in the context of the British Empire, such distinctions were rarely accidental. They were deliberate and quite revealing. In the years following the First World War, the British dominions began to shape their own air arms. The Australian Air Force was set up in the 1920 and the Canadian Air Force in the 1921, and both were granted the title Royal, making them the Royal Australian Air Force and the Royal Canadian Air Force. It was a symbolic gesture, but was important for recognition, legitimacy, and for establishing a degree of parity between the air forces of the dominions and the imperial rulers. India, however, occupied a very different position. When the Indian Air Force was raised in 1932, it emerged without the royal distinction. The omission was intentional. The Royal Air Force was already operating in India since the 1916s, and to extend the same title to an Indian Air Force would have blurred the lines between authority and subordination. It was a line that the British administration was very careful not to cross. British officers held the King's Commission, and the Indian officers, by contrast, were commissioned under the Viceroy. This distinction ensured that the hierarchy remained intact, both in form and in function. It was only much later, in the closing years of the Second World War, that this idea of Indian pilots being inferior began to shift. Indian airmen, having proven themselves across demanding theaters such as Burma, could no longer be confined within the earlier assumptions. Furthermore, the establishment of the Indian Military Academy in 1932 and the constant push for Indianization within the armed forces pushed the British leadership to take swift action to alleviate the concerns of the Indian political and military establishment. In 1945, the title Royal was thus aptly conferred to the Indian Air Force, making it equal to the Royal Air Force in Britain. With independence, however, the transformation was both inevitable and necessary. It was considered that just dropping the royal was easier than introducing other words, and this was in line with the practice followed by other Dominion countries. On 26 January 1950, the title was formally set aside. Allegiance to the British crown no longer held relevance as India emerged as a sovereign republic, and any association with imperial authority was consciously removed. Symbols were redefined, commissions were reissued, and in the process, the very identity of the force was reshaped. The Indian Air Force officers were issued new commissioning parchments that changed the allegiance from the Viceroy to the President of India. The royal title bestowed upon the Indian Air Force was only temporary, and replacing it ensured that the Indian Air Force will no longer be defined by the empire